Tim Peake walks the walk in space, the first British citizen to do it.
Tim, it's really cool seeing that Union Jack go outside. This has explored all over the world.
Then 250 miles above that world, the hard work began, until his American partner had a problem. We'll have the latest.
Also tonight, as school place applications in England close, heads say it was a shambles.
The safer test for Down syndrome that government health advisors want free on the NHS.
And concerns at the cost of saying congratulations, £150 to attend the Queen's birthday celebrations.
This is the ITV Evening News with Alistair Stewart and Charlene White.
Good evening. Proof were it needed that this was much more than an historic photo opportunity. The spacewalk was cut short a little over 2 hours ago when Tim Peake's colleague, Tim Copra, detected a possible leak in his spacesuit. But by then, history had been made by the Brit.
When he stepped outside the International Space Station shortly before 1 o'clock, Major Tim became the first British citizen to carry out a spacewalk. He said it was a privilege and a proud moment to take the Union flag for its first stroll in space. These are the live shots from inside the space station now, where both astronauts have returned safe and sound. And as Paul Davis reports, Major Tim even had time to take a spacewalk selfie.
Tim Peake is about to step out of the safety of the space station, but still pauses to admire the stunning beauty of the setting sun.
Beautiful sunset. Oh,
The hatch is open and the Briton steps outside, a moment in history recognised by ground control.
It's really cool seeing that Union Jack go outside. This has explored all over the world. Now it's explored space.
Thank you, Scott. It's great to be wearing it. Huge privilege. A proud moment.
With the Earth rushing past below them, the astronauts Tim Peake and his NASA colleague Tim Copra go to work. They are repairing a piece of equipment that regulates the power from the space station's solar panels, the prime source of energy. Tim Peake filmed here by the camera in his partner's helmet. This the view from Peake's helmet as he carries out DIY, watched by millions below.
What do you see?
Okay, guys.
Okay, I see starboard, nadir, zenith, and port.
The repair work is completed successfully and ahead of schedule. Attached to Tim Peake's left hand is a photograph of his family. His wife has thanked him for taking their boys out in space. And while all this is happening, the astronauts have passed on to them the best wishes of Paul McCartney.
Sir Paul McCartney, good luck at Astro Tim Peake. We're all watching, no pressure. Wishing you a happy stroll outdoors in the universe, all the best.
There had already been one momentary scare.
For Tim Peake, could you hold your position right there? We're discussing whether or not we saw a safety tether snag a little ways back.
Okay, copy that, holding position.
That came to nothing, but later Tim Copra detected water in his helmet.
Okay, Tim, we're going to have you hold right there. Just let us talk some stuff out here for a second.
The astronauts were not in immediate danger, but ground control decided to terminate the spacewalk while the problem was investigated. The two Tims returned to the safety of the space station. It had been an historic day for Tim Peake. All the team's targets had been achieved. The late technical problem wasn't going to spoil that. Paul Davis, ITV News.
Our science correspondent Alok Jar's been watching Tim Peake's spacewalk from the Astronaut Centre in Cologne. So, as Paul just reminded us there, Alok, it ended slightly early, but are you judging this an overall success?
I think so. I mean, I think everyone here in Cologne is judging it as a success too. When Tim Kopra and Tim Peake left the space station several hours ago, they actually made record time and did their first primary activity within 2.5, 3 hours. And so they were actually ahead of schedule. Then they did their second activity. The first one was to fix the solar panel electrical components, and then they went back to the airlock to collect more things and lay some cables out. They did that too. And Tim Kopra's leak, the water in his helmet, there's actually only very little of it. It was it's almost like an egg cup full. And no one knows what's happened. It's just procedure to bring them back. They weren't in any danger. They came back and they made some preliminary investigations. They're going to continue that. It's happened before, but it doesn't mean that anything terrible happened. You can count this as a success. And I'm sure Tim Peake and Tim Kopra are very, very happy in that space station right now.
Alok, thank you.
Today is deadline day for parents in England scrambling to get applications in for the primary schools of their choice, a process which the National Association of Head Teachers condemned as risking harm to children's education.
It came as a row blew up over claims that over 500,000 children are now being taught in supersized classes of more than 30 pupils. Our political correspondent Lewis Vaughan-Jones has the story.
At St John Fisher Primary School in Harrow in northwest London, it is certainly busy. It's getting bigger and it's oversubscribed.
Be careful up there, all right?
Which means a nervous wait for parents applying for places for their children. How old are you, Quinn?
4.
4. And you go to... Where do
Nursery.
you go? You go to nursery, so you'll be going to school soon?
Yes. All of a sudden it's like these 6 choices. You know, my parents did have this sort of, having to choose 6 schools and then hopefully you'll get the first one.
And it's an anxious wait.
Very anxious, yes.
This is the new building. It will be 6 new classrooms.
The school will soon take 650 pupils, up from just 250 in 2000. You're quite squeezed at the moment then?
We're very crowded. Our library is being used as a classroom because we've already begun the expansion. There's a lack of coordination to ensure that new schools are where the places are needed.
Some at Harrow Council say a lack of coordination is because government has taken power away from councils.
We should have a part in this process of deciding where school places should be delivered, when they should be delivered. At the moment we have our hands tied behind our backs.
4, good girl, go and sit down.
Also today there are claims that class sizes are on the rise. By law, between the ages of 4 and 7, pupils in England can't be taught in class sizes of more than 30. But more than 100,000 infants are now in classes above that limit, and the situation gets worse when you include older pupils where there is no restriction. The Labour Party say more than 500,000 primary school pupils in England are in larger classes. But the local Conservative MP says money is going into schools.
The government is putting record levels of investment in for that time, but it takes time to build schools, to provide new classes and to make sure facilities are available.
Parents will now have to wait until April to find out if their child has a place at a school they want. Lewis Vaughan-Jones, ITV News, Harrow.
A medical drug trial in France has left 1 person brain dead and 5 others in hospital. A French newspaper says the cannabis-based medication was used on all 6 patients at the University Hospital of Rennes in Brittany. Drug trials at the clinic have now been suspended.
The prospect of an early EU referendum came a step closer today, with the European Commission President declaring he's quite sure of a deal with Britain on reform. Jean-Claude Juncker said he's confident of what he called a solution, not a compromise, next month. Our political correspondent Carl Dinnan is in Downing Street 4. Carl, just how much importance should we attach to this?
Well, I think we can take this seriously because Mr. Juncker is the ultimate insider. Although the commission that he heads isn't a party to these talks, they are advising all those who are parties. So he should really know what's going on. And if you listen to what he says, he just doesn't just think that there will be a deal in February. He thinks it'll be a strong one too.
I'm quite sure that we'll have a deal. Not a compromise, a solution. Not a big compromise, a permanent solution in February.
Now, a number 10 source told me they're not quite as confident as Mr. Juncker is, but that the dial has shifted in the last few days. Not only are the negotiations going well, but there's real political will across Europe to get this thing sorted. Now, people at home may be wondering why all this really matters, and it's because of this. The end of February is really the deadline for getting this done so that a referendum can be held before the end of June. And once the school holidays start, then we would have to look at September before there's another chance. And with the possibility of another migrants crisis, that could change everything.
Carl, thank you.
Government medical advisers today recommended that a safer test for Down syndrome should be given to at-risk pregnant women on the NHS in England. ITV News understands the simple blood sample, which would mean far fewer potentially risky invasive tests, is likely to get government approval. Richard Pallow has the story.
Until now, mothers at high risk of having a child with Down syndrome have been left with a choice: decline an amniocentesis or risk miscarriage from what's an invasive operation. But there's another way, a simple blood test, which gave Kate Ewer huge relief upon discovering at the age of 46 she was 13 weeks pregnant.
Every woman who finds out that they're high risk must ask for this test because it just makes such a huge difference. You're going through a very difficult time anyway, obviously wondering what might happen and what your options are. It's very stressful, it's very worrying, and just to have a test done in a few seconds, it's brilliant.
So far, only 2 English NHS trusts are offering the test, which analyses the child's DNA. But doctors leading it say it will redefine treatment in this area.
We can much more precisely identify who does need an amniocentesis and who doesn't. And the key things are, it is safer because it prevents the risk of miscarriage and it is more accurate.
The DNA tests performed on this chip have actually been available privately in this country for 4 years, but up till now the NHS has remained silent on it. But by backing it now, and with its 99% accuracy rate, in the region of about 200 babies will now be born every year that previously would have been miscarried. ITV News understands that the Department of Health is likely to approve it for use in England. You can see the moon? But parents of those with Down syndrome say they're concerned more mothers will have terminations and so miss out on the joy children like 9-year-old Lucas can bring.
I think it's very upsetting that people may see that as an opportunity not to keep their children. And actually, it's such a blessing to have a child, full stop.
And one family for whom this test would have made no difference. Richard Pallow, ITV News.
Still to come on the ITV Evening News, the Archbishop's apology to the gay and lesbian community for the hurt caused by the church.
And little hope for the town divided by flooding as a new bridge is proposed in Tadcaster.
But first, it's a deal that will create a new giant in Britain's media and telecoms market. The Competitions Authority today gave the green light to BT's buyout of the mobile phone company EE, which will put around 35 million TV, broadband and mobile customers under one corporate roof. Our consumer editor Chris Shaw reports on what that means to the people who pay the bills.
This £12.5 billion merger moulds BT and EE into a new telecom giant. EE customer Evelyn Perkins says the new bigger company must bring in smaller bills.
You wouldn't have to be paying extra money to pay direct debit for one, the other, and, if it was all together, it would be a lot cheaper, I would have thought.
The new telecom giant will own substantial rights to the airwaves used for mobile networks, a big advantage against rivals, with demand rising up to 70% a year. And there's concern that BT already controls how new phone masts are connected and could now favour EE, which currently has 35% of the mobile market. BT and EE combined will have 35 million customers. BT is investing £1 billion in sports rights. Now the link with EE gives it new ways to deliver that coverage through mobile phone deals.
Only on BT Sport.
One of the biggest things that BT gets from this isn't to do with phones and masts, it's to do with bricks and mortar. From hundreds of these shops This new telecoms giant will bundle together packages of mobile, home phone, TV and broadband. But will customers be getting a good deal? Some believe economies of scale could bring savings, but there are also warnings that service, not prices, will drop.
Well, BT and EE themselves already have a dismal record for customer service. Bringing them together into one giant will worry customers. They're going to get worse customer service, potentially prices going up, less competition in the telecoms market overall.
In this relationship, the biggest mobile and largest broadband firms combine into a formidable commercial force. It's clear BT and EE are marrying for money. Chris Choi, ITV News.
The Archbishop of Canterbury today apologised for what he called the hurt and pain caused by the Anglican Church to the gay and lesbian community.
He was speaking after church leaders agreed measures against liberal Anglicans in America for endorsing gay marriage. Rebecca Barry on the latest attempt to reconcile deep divisions.
They're here fleeing persecution because of the Archbishop of Uganda.
They're here to remind the head of the global Anglican Church that while they grapple over gay marriage, people are still being persecuted for their sexuality. And after this, he did apologise for the church's failings.
I want to take this opportunity personally to say how sorry I am for the hurt and pain in the past and present that the church has caused.
But he stood by their decision to sanction the American church for allowing same-sex marriage. Isn't there a danger that this makes the church simply look very outdated?
It makes us look out of line in the United States, in the UK, yes, but not in many other parts of the world, no.
There's been a rift ever since the US church consecrated the openly gay Canon Jean Robinson. And today, Anglican leaders banned the church from decision-making for 3 years. The agreement reached by church leaders here may have avoided the immediate threat of a permanent split, but in so doing, they've left some more liberal members feeling rejected.
I'm a faithful Christian. I believe I've been called by God to serve this church. And sadly, I feel that we are marginalised, we're second class, we're discriminated against almost on a daily basis. Things are changing at a parish level. Often there are churches that open their arms to us. But frankly, I think the general public at large believe that the church is anti-gay.
But African churches are still deeply opposed.
In my own country, we will not say there are no gays and lesbians, but culturally, to flaunt it as a way of life is not acceptable.
The Archbishop has now been tasked with healing the legacy of hurt, because at the heart of this church, there are still bitter divisions. Rebecca Barry, ITV News, Canterbury.
The trial of the late Labour peer Lord Janner over allegations of sexual offences was formally dropped today. He was charged with 22 offences dating back to 1963, many of them involving children under 16. This morning, a court decided that a planned trial of facts would not go ahead following his death at the age of 87.
A study by the University of Nottingham claims music videos on YouTube are putting the health of British teenagers at risk. Researchers say images depicting the use of tobacco and alcohol have a harmful effect.
Just go with me. I'm not a film star.
And David Bowie's album Black Star is top of the charts tonight. The singer, who died on Sunday, dominates the top 40.
The collapse of the historic bridge at Tadcaster in Yorkshire into the swollen waters of the River Wharfe was one of the abiding images of the post-Christmas floods. Tonight, there is hope of a solution to the row that followed it over how and where to put up a temporary footbridge to replace it. Well, Damon Green is live for us there tonight. Damon.
Well, it's not long since the spot where I'm standing was waist deep in water. It will be a long time before the bridge behind me has finally been repaired. This town is struggling to get back on its feet, and today it took a big step towards normality, even if it had to negotiate a very tricky piece of local politics.
It's all going to go any minute, isn't it?
When the river swept away the bridge at Tadcaster, the damage it did was far greater than a few tons of stonework sent to the bottom of the floods. It cut this old town in two. And 2 weeks later, with the shops of Bridge Street still struggling with little or no passing trade, finally a deal to put a new footbridge in place. In the Bridge Street Barber that's only just reopened, a huge relief.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant news. It's great to bring us both sides together. That's what's needed, because it's just such a journey.
But in a small North Yorkshire town, nothing is ever straightforward, especially a town whose skyline is dominated by a big business. Samuel Smith's brewery also owns much of the property here, and the proposed site of the new bridge would have been partly on its land. The boss said no. And the traders of Tadcaster were suddenly in a difficult spot.
Do you think some people are stuck there or in a way?
It's difficult to say really, because nobody really knows what's happening. I mean, he's my landlord as well, so he's a very good landlord.
Now the local non-league football team has stepped in and offered its own land to make the project happen, though the initial snub from local bigwigs won't likely be forgotten.
A lot of people were anti-Sam Smith. I don't think they're going to stop drinking his beer though.
Because people might enjoy a grudge, but they enjoy a pint of beer even more. Damon Green, ITV News, in North Yorkshire.
Now, it'll be the biggest street party Britain has ever seen. 10,000 people crammed along the length of the Mall to celebrate the Queen's 90th birthday.
But tickets to be among those sitting down to the huge Patrons' Lunch charity event in June will cost £150, which caused some concerns. Dan Rivers reports on the arrangements to celebrate an historic royal milestone.
This is how the Queen celebrated her Diamond Jubilee. Thousands of people gathering on the Mall, a free event open to all. But for her 90th birthday, it will be very different. A seated, ticket-only street party costing £150 a head. Among those organising it is the Queen's grandson, Peter Phillips, who's also a director of the Australian company running the event.
10,000 people on the Mall, all having individual hampers, but basically we are celebrating the Queen's patronage to over 600 charities and organisations. It hasn't been done before, and it's something that the Queen takes a great personal interest in, and she's excited that the fact this is the first time that all of her organisations have come together.
9,000 guests will be from her charities, but they'll have to pay £1,500 for 10 tickets. They can sell on 4 of those to raise funds. The other 1,000 tickets will be available to the public in a ballot, but will still cost £150.
You know, historically, these great national celebrations on the Mall when the royal family is there, whether it was the end of the Second World War, whether it's Prince Charles's first wedding, or whether it was the Diamond Jubilee, people have always gathered and been able to gather for free. So it doesn't seem quite right that suddenly people are going to be asked to pay.
But organisers say there will be large screens in St James's Park and Green Park, enabling the public to watch what's happening. It's hoped it'll inspire hundreds of other street parties around the country.
We hope that the event here on the Mall will literally be a catalyst. It will be the focal point of a national celebration.
While it'll be very different to these scenes in 2012, the organisers say the Patrons' Lunch is a not-for-profit event. The money raised will go to the very charities proud to have the Queen as their patron. Dan Rivers, ITV News.
Before we go, a reminder of our main story. Major Tim Peake's historic spacewalk outside the International Space Station. When he stepped into space nearly 250 miles above the Earth, he became the first British citizen to carry out a spacewalk.
And though his stint was ended early, when water was detected in his colleague's helmet, both astronauts returned safe and sound back inside the space station. You can see more highlights of that spacewalk on our website, itv.com/news.
Well, that's all for now. Tom Bradby will be here later with news at 10.
But from all of the team here for now, a very good evening to you.
Goodbye.